Anyway, right, let's go on. I was speaking to some people about how things are going, and some are still convinced things are moving slowly, despite our show covering the sheer depth of the old system, and even listening to the piece earlier about all the various cogs and wheels and connections and dots of the banking system. And then when you add in so many people, some of which are bots or synths or otherwise, all propping up the failed system, the task kind of becomes heavier for the few delivering and trying to implement the change. You know, it's a 16,500 year control system that has been smashed to smithereens in under 5 to 6 years. Why do you think the Rothschilds are going with their hands out to Moscow? Because they've had it all taken off them is why. To a point of which it will never return. Never. Many of their hidden worlds and entities crushed, and they will not be returning either. You know, we have achieved so much, but much work is still to go. Now, some expressed the enormity of changing humanity and how far we have to go before the more visible external changes take place, which I do get to a point. But I reminded one group this week, they were looking at things from only one perspective or one angle, which is a common perception, and how we all have to retrain our brains to think and look in a different way. Now the gist was, we have a mountain to climb to wake people up, and also start the rebuilding phase, and it was perceived that we had to climb the proverbial Mount Everest, and too many can look at it in that way. But things go up and things also come down. Now the elites were all at the top of the mountain and we were in the valley, but we're edging up that mountain, and given the circumstances, that is extraordinary in and of itself, and is, in my opinion, criminally overlooked or ignored by some, not only within our group but outside, and much worse also in the alt media in general, as to how far we've actually come. But this is a tendency of humanity, and why is it always a focus of people to complain, whine or moan of what hasn't been done, largely by others, notwithstanding whether they have reflected, have they done enough themselves? The focus is always what we have lost or not done, and don't recognise or realise what we do have or what we have done. But here's the kicker, and what people forget is they, the control system, are plummeting down the mountain at a far faster rate than we are climbing. Make no mistake about that. Once we pass them on the way up, that rise will increase dramatically in pace and elevation. Remember, perception is not a one-way street. I will end this show as we begun it with a period of reflection and introspection. No matter how bad we, mainly in the Western world, think we have it, it does literally pale into insignificance when measured against the rest of the world. Now that is not said to make you feel guilty, but to balance your perspective on life and see beyond your own bubble world many have created for themselves, some refuse to let go of, and some have stepped outside of their bubble and are now rippling the world out of its slumber. I tend to think at times that our own members underestimate this group and what we're actually doing here. This is not a social group. It is a working group primarily. And that, I feel at times, is perhaps lost on some. Yes, I'm fine with having a laugh in the chat. I'm probably the worst for it. But I never started it. Michelle did. And comments on the Facebook. But I don't lose sight of what our purpose and goals are in and outside of this group. And remember, some of us don't have the luxury to just switch off. But sometimes there are times when I wonder, do people realise the amount of work, time and sacrifice that goes into what is known as THI? Notwithstanding the abuse, flack and game playing that goes on a far too regular basis. And the same applies to the work of the Trust. You have all been given a small sample of the real work of the Trust and the team. And I can assure you the real focus is not just on pieces of paper with numbers on them. It's vast in its scope. And yet for many, the Trust itself will be judged on when the funding comes out. But is that fair on those who are trying to deliver? When at the very least our regular THI listeners are all aware that it's much more to the Trust than funding. Essentially, the Trust is a high-stakes strategy game player, whereby all involved in it run the risk of losing their life on a daily basis. Again, something that in general is overlooked. As the desire of things, particularly in America, but the rest of the world is not that far behind either, that everything must happen today, tomorrow, or in 2 weeks. Without taking into account the varying levels, hurdles, clowns and beasts we face on an almost daily basis. And then we have the day-to-day life hurdles to overcome, the same as everybody else. And there's an old saying, never judge people unless you've walked in their shoes. I can assure you many would not walk in ours for too far. It's a world that's riddled with people and other entities treating you as some sort of target range, trying to oust you, kill you or dupe you on a recurring basis. And yet all of this is done in the name of saving our species and attempting to drive the planet into a better shape and surroundings than it has been for tens of thousands of years. I will repeat again, THI is not a social group. We were tasked to drive humanity forward, along with Randy of Off Planet Radio and Alan of Circle of White Light, plus others who are welcome to join in with the envision of improving life for the betterment of all. Some people I spoke to this week, and previously, people have asked, why THI? My reply is, why not? Why are you thinking in limitation terms? Which other group of people would you give it to? Religious, governments, agencies, the military? Are they the perfect representations of our society? I'm sure you will all agree that none of those mentioned are. Otherwise we would have a better world, would we not? The reality is all of those elements contributed massively to the fall of humanity, so why would we ask them to do anything? How many other groups on the internet can say their lives have changed enormously since joining a group? How many other groups have learned the in-depth knowledge our group has? How many other groups focus on us and our own role in the control system? Finger pointing and blaming others only solves less than half of the problem. Only those three groups are aware there was a control system above the royals, the bloodlines, the deep states, and the think tank Bilderberger type groups. And you have over the years unlearned the lies you have been fed all of your life, and then began to learn more of the facts and the truth than any other groups. All of you by now have witnessed being in other groups, and you have seen for yourselves how far behind in terms of knowledge and understanding. It's as plain as night and day. Our goals are to keep it simple. Need, not greed. Service yourself to then be able to be service to others. Fairness, compassion, empathy, flexibility, and that oh so rare item called common sense. You see, none of this is rocket science, complex or difficult. Essentially, it's the basics of life. And we have to go back to the basics to start again. Everything else has failed. Repeating failure is for the realm of the RV people, the jackasses who took the carrots, not realising those carrots were not even real to begin with. I showed some people on Tuesday a path of life, and it's the letter N for Norman. The first line up is the left-hand path, but it has no gate or exit. Those on the top of that first line think they have reached the pinnacle. They think they are the illuminated ones. They are the gods known as the L-ites or elites. But it is the false light they bathe in, and that light of theirs is dimming by the day now. They have a long fall. To get to the right-hand path, you have to slide down the middle, a steep descent. Here lies the sleepers and the majority of the alt media. And the reason I say that is that they're still following the lies that are spat out by clown agency-based groups and largely blaming something or someone else, neglecting the fact that despite being the 99%, they are somehow not responsible for the world's ills. Wrong thinking. Our group, Randy's and Alan's, have stripped away those lies, come off the downward descent and are climbing up the right-hand path. Our members are somewhere between a third and 3/4 of the way up that path, depending on the individual's ability to learn and understand the information. Now, some people have said we have to wait for the sleepers to catch up. There are 3 things wrong with that thinking. 1, How long did it take you to get where you are now? 2. Do you think you yourself will stand still to allow them to catch up? And 3. If point 2 is correct, where are the pioneers or way showers to move forward going to come from? Do you think you're just going to stand still? For most of you on that path, no, you won't. You will go through the gate. The right-hand path, unlike the left-hand path, has an open gate for progression. Some of you one day will go through that gate and back to where you belong, amongst the spiritual worlds and out amongst the stars. As for the rest, they had the exact same opportunity as you. They failed to take it. And none of you are responsible for that, only themselves. Whilst they chose to point outside of themselves, we looked, embraced, and went inwards. The ending message is remember what you have, not what you haven't. Remember how far you have come and not focus how far you have to go. This was never a race, a sprint, or a dash. It is, and always was, a long-term project. That project will go beyond my time here, and many of you also. But we lay the foundations before putting up the walls and installing the roof. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Enjoy the rest of your holiday, and bye for now.